Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Welcome back to another Strong Believers video. Today we have Brother Ayman with us, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And he's going to do most of the talking for this video, inshallah. And to say a little bit about Brother Ayman, he's got. Shall I ask you to do it, or who you
what
are?
were you gonna say?
Say that you got a blog.
Yeah, okay, safe. I
It's
thought you were
called
gonna.
Sakina,
I was
yeah?
thinking, where's this guy going with this, bro? He's got ijazah in 25 subjects.
Ayman has a blog called As-Sakina, and the aim of it is basically to clear out doubts and bring tranquility to the hearts of the believers, inshallah. So this goes part and parcel with the idea of becoming strong believers. So Brother Ayman is going to answer a very frequent question, which is, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that some of us will go to hell, why did He create us?
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Just to clarify something that Noor said, the website is not really for, it's to bring sakina, but not really to the heart, because obviously only Allah can do that. What we can do is basically sort of talk on an intellectual level, and if you're convinced by that, then inshallah Allah is the one who guides the hearts, not people.
I think to answer this, firstly, we need to know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Yeah, as you mentioned, as Noor mentioned, that we have to have a bit of prerequisite knowledge before we answer this question. And that prerequisite knowledge is knowing who Allah is, which He Himself outlines in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the Quran, Allah tells us that He has, and in the Sunnah as well, that He tells us that He has certain names and attributes, right? And these names and attributes, it basically govern the way in which Allah acts, and that's what He specified about Himself. And that's important to answering the question that we framed. Okay, so there are many names and attributes, but specific to this question, I want to highlight just a few. So He's the most merciful, He's the most wise, He has the totality of wisdom, He's the most powerful. He has the ability to do anything that He wants, however He wants, whenever He wants, in whatever way He wants, and He's never questioned about anything that He does. Becoming like the director or something.
Minor, bro. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Sorry we had to go and pray Maghrib. We're back now, so we'll continue with where we left off, inshallah. Brother Ayman, you were saying that there are three levels and three ways to answer the question, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, just to kick off with the first one then. The first one is that we mentioned as a prerequisite, part of the prerequisite knowledge, that Allah has certain names and attributes. Now, the first way to answer the question out of the three is that when we talk about Allah's names and attributes, they have a scope, and that scope is not fully understood by us, and that's our belief as Muslims. So, for example, when I say that Allah is the most merciful, I can understand what mercy means because, for example, I look at mercy in the world around me. Me and Noor are friends. There's mercy between us. I love you, bro.
Alhamdulillah.
But obviously, that mercy comes nowhere near to Allah's mercy. So we will never, according to our understanding of, according to Islam, we'll never have a full understanding of the full scope of Allah's names and attributes, and that goes for His mercy and all the other names and attributes that we mentioned and the ones that we didn't mention as well. So if that's the case, then that means that we don't have a full understanding of the way in which Allah's, how can I say, mind. You can't say that He has a mind, but as in the way that Allah, I don't know, thinks. Put it in apostrophes. We can't have a full understanding of that apart from that which He tells us. We can only know about Allah that which He tells us. So, for example, if there's a thief in the world, there's a thief who steals. I can postulate and I can try and guess why the thief would steal. Maybe he likes stealing. Maybe he's in need of it. Maybe he wants to be a celebrity thief. There's a range of possible options or range of possible reasons why he might have stolen, which I can basically assume and get to because I have some sort of shared human experience with the thief. I could experience those things as well, and that's why I can say he could have done it for X, Y, and Z. But in the case of Allah, as I mentioned, we don't understand fully His names and attributes. We don't understand the way in which He thinks. We don't understand the way in which He operates in a complete sense. So there is no shared common experience between us and Allah, except in the very small way in which we understand His attributes. For example, as I mentioned, there's a bit of mercy between me and Noor. So if there's no shared common human experience, we can't extrapolate our thinking, say, okay, I think I think I would do it in this way. Therefore, Allah should do it in this way as well. No, it doesn't work like that. And as I mentioned as well, one of Allah's one of the characteristics of Allah is that He is sovereign from our desires and our whims and what we think He should be like. So this is the first level of sort of answering this question, is that we don't have a shared common human experience with Allah which we can sort of try and understand the way in which He operates. We can only understand the way in which He operates and why He does what He does from what He tells us. And that makes The second level of explanation is that we have free will. Allah tells us that we have free will. From the classical Islamic perspective, the way to understand free will goes as follows, in a very sort of summarized way. Allah created us, and He has power, He has qudra over every single thing in the world. He's able to do everything, and He created us. When He created us, He knew what we were going to do, and He wrote everything in the preserved tablet about everything that would happen from the beginning of time until the end of time. Allah created us, and we have free will, but our free will is subservient to Allah's free will. Meaning that we have a sort of free will, but it's not completely free in the sense that Allah's free will is free. But we have the ability to choose between right and wrong. Now, somebody might ask the question, how could it be that if Allah knows what I'm going to do, then basically I also have free will? Allah's knowledge does not necessitate action. So what I mean by that is, we can strike an example. We can say, for example, if I watch a film and I say, and I memorize every single line in the film, then I play back the film. Does my knowledge of what the people in the film say necessitate that they say that? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if I had memorized it or not. They still would have said that anyway. So likewise with Allah, Allah knows everything, but He doesn't force it upon us. His knowledge is different from His actions. So there's still a question left, is that, okay, even if Allah doesn't force us to do anything, why would He create the people in the first place when He knows how they would use their free will, and He knows that those people, and certain people, would use their free will to lead themselves into the hellfire?
وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون.
It seems like there might be sort of a conflict here between Allah's free will and our free will. However, there's some verses in the Quran that I just want to point out which will help us to look at this from a different perspective. One ayah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. The amana, some of the scholars basically explained it, that it means that we have the ability to choose between right and wrong. However, I want to point something else out in relation to this ayah, which is that how is it possible? This ayah assumes that there's a non-materialistic aspect to the world, in that Allah can talk to the mountains and they can reply to Him, and they have that ability. But we've never seen any mountains talking. We've never seen a mountain thinking or speaking. So that's an aspect of free will that we can't understand. That's an aspect of basically the way that the world works, which we can't understand. There's also another ayah in the Quran where the people were asking the Prophet ﷺ about the soul, and Allah says to the Prophet to say to the people, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنْ عِلْمِي إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. The soul is obviously what controls, by extension, the way in which we act. So it controls whether we do good, whether we do bad, and it controls basically our free will. So if Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ that you, O Muhammad ﷺ, have no knowledge of the soul, and we have this non-materialistic aspect of the mountains talking and this kind of thing, then obviously there's an assumption here that we don't fully understand how free will works from the Islamic perspective. All we understand is that we have it, Allah has given it to us, but He hasn't explained the mechanism in which it works. So that's one thing. Now if we go back to the names and attributes of Allah, as I explained earlier, we don't understand the full scope of them. We don't understand the full scope of the names and attributes of Allah. As I mentioned, I gave the example with the mercy. Likewise, the same is with Allah's knowledge, and the same is with Allah's qudra. We don't understand the full scope of these things. So we've got two things here that we originally thought were conflicting, is that our in our free will, and the second is that in Allah's knowledge of what we're going to do and how we're going to use our free will. However, if we now take a step back, we can say, okay, we don't have a full knowledge of the mechanisms of how Allah's knowledge and how His mercy and how His power and how all of these things work, and also we don't have a full understanding of how our free will works. A contradiction can only be said to be a contradiction when two separate things are fully defined and they're fully understood. So for example, if I say Noor lives in London, Noor and Noor lives in England, as two separate statements, a person who doesn't know what London is and doesn't know what England is, he will think that there's a contradiction. He will think that how can this guy be living in two places? But once you explain it, once the matter is basically expanded on, and you explain to somebody that London is in England, then there's no contradiction anymore. However, Allah hasn't, if we come back to what we were talking about now, Allah hasn't explained the full mechanism of how our free will works, and He hasn't explained the full mechanism also of how His names and attributes work. So the second point out of the three that I mentioned is that we can't therefore deduce a logical contradiction between two things which are not fully defined. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. It's a bit wordy. I'm a bit of a rambler, but just bear with me. The third thing is that any question that begins with why did Allah do this, why did Allah do that, why didn't He do this, why didn't He do that, and obviously, as I mentioned, first of all, with the first point, it's based on false assumptions. Second, when people ask these questions, sometimes they can actually leave religion due to it. Some people might leave Islam. This might be a real shubha, a real doubt for the person. However, what I want to just take a step back and let's just analyze this in a logical sense. Even if, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, one of Allah's characteristics, one of the attributes of Allah is that He is totally free of our whims and desires. He's not subject to our dictates of what God should be like, in a complete sense. Yeah. And that's because we are emotional creatures. If a person's not educated, it's understandable why they might leave Islam because of that. But if we sort of try and take emotions out as much as we can and look at it logically, even if Allah wanted to create humans and then consign them all to the hellfire and throw them all in there, He could do that. It's His prerogative. There's no contradiction between Him doing that and the fact that He exists. He could do that, no problem, and that's His prerogative as God, as a creator. So now I say, if Allah created us and He knows what we're going to do, and we do exactly as He knows that we will do, where's the logical contradiction? How does it logically follow from the fact that He knows everything to the fact that He doesn't exist? It doesn't logically follow. It's just that we, as humans, can't imagine doing something like that. So therefore, we come to the conclusion that therefore God doesn't exist. But nonsensical. There's a huge jump between saying, I don't understand why Allah does it this way, and then saying, therefore God doesn't exist. There's a huge gap in logic there. So this is all well and good that we've answered this question. As Noor mentioned at the beginning, I named my online blog Sakina. the purpose of this life obviously is to worship Allah and to love Him and to come closer to Him. That's the purpose of life. What I want to do now is try and basically relate what knowledge we've just shared and how we can sort of take out some spiritual benefit from it. For me, as I've reflected on this issue, and you all and even Noor as well might take something totally different away from it, but this is just my reflection on this, is that we know that Allah is the most merciful and we know He is the most just. So anything that He does is, any of the actions that He does are always imbued with His mercy, and they're always imbued with His knowledge, and they're imbued as well with His justice. So everything that He does contains all of these things. So therefore we know that anything that happens in the world, no matter how bad it seems to us, it always contains these things. Islam, linguistically, means to submit. Okay, Istislam means to submit to God. When we submit to God, we're submitting to the fact that there's going to be certain things that we don't understand. There's going to be certain things that we don't know why they are the way they are. And when we accept that and when we understand that, that will actually just bring peace and serenity to the heart, because we have, a certain faith, a certain level of faith that Allah's actions are the best actions because of all of His names and attributes that we mentioned. Because it's just like, okay, you don't understand how, I don't understand how it works. God is in some mysterious way, He's the all-knowing, and that's just the end of it. But no, that is not a cop-out. It's not really a cop-out answer. The reason being is that if we had all of the knowledge that God had, then we would be God ourselves, wouldn't we? And when we ask in all of these why questions, we have that false assumption, and that false assumption can, on some level, it can lead to a level of shirk, because we're assuming that we can understand the way in which things work. So the fact that we as human beings do not have a full grasp and a full understanding of things is perfectly logical. One of my reflections is that, as I just mentioned in the third point, is that we can't logically conclude from the fact that God created people knowing that they would go to hell, that therefore God doesn't exist. If that's the case, then, and this question of why leads neither to therefore Islam is true or therefore Islam is false, it doesn't really go either way. What we can do is we can take this question and sort of put it to the side for just a second, and we can gather all the positive proofs for Islam, gather all the positive proofs for the existence of God, and when they all add up, they're in the thousands. In my belief, they're in the thousands, and they're basically undeniable. And we can come to the conclusion that in a statement which is short and concise, Allah does certain things that we don't understand, but there are so many positive proofs for Islam that therefore it must be the haqq, the truth. Positive.
So if you guys didn't catch anything, or maybe you found something confusing, then go over to as-sakina.com. Is it as-sakina.com?
as-sakinablog.wordpress.com.
Yeah, so go over to his blog, inshallah, and have a full read of his blogs. He's got 3 articles on there now, so go and read them, inshallah. And hopefully this helped you guys. If you guys have any other questions, then leave it in the comment box, and we'll try to answer. I'll get him to answer the questions, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for watching, inshallah, and hopefully we'll see you with another episode with Brother Ayman. So if you guys have any questions about these kind of topics, then leave a comment in the comment section.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
That doesn't exist. Okay, where should I start from again? I think I need to start this point again. Where should I start?
Go with that third thing, basically.
The third point is?
That is the third point, no?
Yeah, there is a third point.
Yeah.
Third and last point. Yeah.
This is the third point.
This is the third point.
Yeah, so make it.
Is it recording?
Yeah. Seemingly contradiction.
Okay, so flip snake, bear pressure, bro. Delete this one, bro.